The faults of selling Buddha statues, scriptures, and stupas. A practitioner disciple of Dagpo Rinpoche sold many Buddhist scriptures to make a living. When reflecting upon this, he said to the Venerable Master, "I have sold many such Dharma texts and committed misdeeds. What is the best way to purify them?" At that time, the Venerable Dagpo replied, "The best method is to buy those Dharma texts back, which means to invite them back, or to recreate the exact same representations of Dharma, or to create even larger ones. For instance, regarding Buddha statues, if you have destroyed a Buddha statue, you must build a new, larger one. Or, if you have destroyed a Dharma text, you must also go and buy it back." This was about a disciple of the Venerable Dagpo who committed the negative karma of selling Buddha statues and scriptures. His Holiness cited this scriptural evidence. The sutras also state, regarding the Buddha and the true Dharma, if you confess by providing items of the same kind, the misdeeds can be purified. There are also accounts in the sutras saying, if I have destroyed Buddha statues or the true Dharma, then to make amends and confess, I must create identical Buddha statues or reproduce the same Buddhist scriptures. Only then can I attain purification. If you have ever destroyed objects of the three jewels, you must create objects of the same kind to confess. Or, if you have sold objects of the three jewels, you must buy them back to confess. Only through this can you achieve complete purification. Regarding the money earned by selling Buddhist scriptures, one must be extremely cautious. On the one hand, in this current age, for the Buddha's enlightened activities to benefit sentient beings through statues, although spreading Dharma texts widely and universally alongside golden Buddha statues is a very wonderful thing, on the other hand, those who sell them must also reflect deeply. Otherwise, it is uncertain whether it will result in positive or negative karma. His Holiness's explanation here is sometimes not very explicit, and what follows seems quite severe. But in fact, regarding this matter, when I taught the Bodhicariavatara, or the words of my perfect teacher in the past, I specifically addressed it. According to the teachings of past eminent monks and great masters, and the instructions of certain gurus, selling Buddha statues and scriptures indeed carries a certain degree of fault. Of course, there are also different viewpoints on this. Naturally, I have not found in the sutras any exceptionally definitive evidence regarding this. Indeed, what was spoken in the past was primarily aimed at preventing misdeeds. But what I actually want to discuss today is whether selling Buddha statues or selling scriptures or selling thankas and so forth are absolutely sinful acts. I feel that it is not necessarily the case. Although relying entirely on this to make a living entails a certain degree of negative karma, in a certain sense, our sutras frequently mention that a particular sutra is incredibly supreme and must be read, upheld, copied, and circulated. It must constantly be propagated. To propagate it, distributing it to others completely free of charge presents certain difficulties. Therefore, if our Buddha statues, our Buddhist scriptures, and our stupas do not enter the market, their space for survival in the future will become increasingly narrow and bleak, especially in the era to come. Not everyone will necessarily have faith. Not everyone will act out of pure devotion to provide these things entirely for free without making a profit. This is simply unrealistic. Thus, from a long-term perspective, selling Buddha statues, scriptures, and stupas seems to be a necessity. My perspective today is slightly different from before. Previously, I spoke mainly from the standpoint of prevention. But now, for the representations of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha to remain in this world for a long time into the future, they may need to enter the market. If they do not enter the market, their space for survival will gradually vanish. Therefore, if I provide Buddhist scriptures, for example, at the very least, I will require some compensation for my labor. Some gurus have also mentioned in the past that regarding already completed Buddha statues and scriptures, trading them back and forth incurs fault. However, if you rely on your own abilities to create new ones, for example, where there were no statues before, you now create 1,000 Buddha statues and then sell them, As long as the profit margin isn't excessive and it involves no deception or fraud, it doesn't necessarily incur fault. Of course, the teachings of various gurus differ from one another. But if we look at it from another angle, it is true that if we emphasize strongly that no Buddha statues can be sold, and no Buddhist scriptures can be sold, well, currently some Khenpos at our Larangar are exceptionally cautious about karma. Even on a teacup, they forbid printing a single R word. In that regard, the fault of selling scriptures is indeed something to be mindful of. Sometimes, if these products are trampled upon or frequently placed in dirty environments, that would be unacceptable. However, if that is not the case, and our intention isn't simply to sell statues, if they are simply kept in clean places, having an image of a Garuda or something similar, especially when placed in pure environments, having a few objects of the three jewels might actually be beneficial. Of course, we must examine the nature of the product. If they are frequently stepped on or trampled, then upon such items it is best not to have Buddhist scriptures or statues. But if we react to every minor instance, including finding a Buddha statue on a souvenir, with no, I'm so afraid of the fault of selling statues. Well, currently there are some, as everyone in Larungar knows, some of these external merchants are selling Buddha statues every single day. For us internally, although it is a way to make money, we don't even dare to touch the slightest thing related to the Buddha out of fear of committing a misdeed. On the one hand, such careful discernment of karma is necessary, but on the other hand, as long as this Buddha statue is not going to be placed in dirty locations, and you have created a Buddha statue, what people are buying is your product, not the Buddha itself. And by creating this Buddha statue, one that previously did not exist in this world, you have brought it into existence. Allowing sentient beings to see and make contact with it, the merit derived from this should logically be present. Of course, His Holiness's words and the statements of some traditional gurus were made when the changes in the world, compared to the changes in the world today, were completely different. Even concerning worldly people, the values of your parents differ from the values of children today, and the values several generations from now will be different still. Therefore, sometimes the Dharma must also adapt to the times and harmonize with the capacities of sentient beings. If we act entirely in accordance with traditional methods, claiming everything incurs fault, then sometimes it is possible that whether such prohibition creates a greater fault or not prohibiting it creates a fault becomes hard to say. Therefore, sometimes everyone may need to reconsider. Do not be overly extreme, becoming excessively terrified over minor details. That is probably unnecessary. Previously, we Tibetans thought, we cannot paint thankas. Painting thankas entails tremendous negative karma. It was said that the karma of those who make a living through thankas is very severe. There were various claims like this. But in reality, painting thankas should also hold a certain degree of merit. I think, by the same logic, continuously creating Buddha statues means that these Buddha statues in various corners of the world all possess the significance of benefiting sentient beings. But in our society, it is impossible for everyone to provide things unconditionally and for free. Initially, in the early days, it should also be recorded in some of my Dharma texts that I cited many sources, including King Mengguang, and numerous scriptural proofs and accounts to address this. But in practical, everyday life, I am especially grateful to those in places like Chengdu who sell scriptures and statues. Without them, we wouldn't be able to invite Buddha statues from anywhere. It is truly like that. If those who sell Dharma texts were all terrified and dared not touch the texts, perhaps no one would be able to invite the Tripitaka. Because even if they wanted to, it wouldn't be available. But because they offer them for trade, we have the opportunity and we can purchase them. And after buying them, we can share them with others to form connections and buy them for others. Therefore, regarding this issue, of course, I am not saying today that selling them is entirely permissible, but it is something everyone should reflect upon. From the perspective of Mahayana Buddhism, benefiting sentient beings is undeniably crucial. To benefit sentient beings, If Buddha statues and scriptures are widespread throughout the world, more sentient beings will form connections with them. In that case, these objects of the three jewels will bring benefit to all beings who see, hear, or touch them. Even if one invites them at a high price, that person possesses respect for the Buddha. For example, with a Buddha statue, no matter how much I sell it for, the buyer still maintains reverence for the Buddha. This demonstrates that our Buddha statues possess value. As long as something has value in this society, it will always be passed down. If something lacks value, it will ultimately perish from this world. In this regard, perhaps, I am not saying the Guru's teachings were unreasonable, but Gurus likely spoke based on the Venerable Dagpo and many practitioners of the past. He was quite concerned about trading objects of the three jewels to make a living. This definitely carries a certain degree of fault. But if on the one hand, it is to propagate the Dharma, and on the other hand, one earns a small amount from it to sustain oneself, even years ago many Buddhists were sustaining themselves this way, while simultaneously providing great convenience to others. Of course, this is something traditional elder gurus vehemently opposed. If you sell Buddha statues and scriptures, then you are not my disciple, stay far away from me, Amitabha. They would say things like that. But generally speaking, we really must consider in the future that we should actually be grateful to those who sell statues. Even in places like Nepal and India, although the craftsmen may lack faith, they create many Buddha statues. Look at the ones we have here. The Buddha statues they create are truly exquisite. Therefore, the merit of doing so is still very vast. It is stated here that after selling Buddha statues, scriptures, and stupas, if the money earned is used for businesses involving killing or merely hoarding wealth, this is called squandering the wealth of the Dharma. The negative karma is exceptionally severe. Selling Buddhist scriptures to sustain oneself indicates that Buddhism has reached its final days. Using scriptures to support a family, or using them to commit misdeeds in business, is the greatest kind of sorrow, and is also squandering the wealth of the Dharma. The text speaks quite strictly here. This is certainly how many traditional elder gurus would view it. They place immense importance on karma, but sometimes, if all Buddhist practitioners cease to circulate these objects of the three jewels, and they gradually disappear entirely, indeed, in this world, a dazzling array of other products will multiply, while items related to the three jewels will become increasingly scarce. This would be a great pity. We all hope that, whether it be Buddha statues or thankas or Buddhist scriptures, in the future they can be transformed. For example, taking the works of our gurus and publishing them as exquisitely crafted books. As for certain Buddha statues, those that are renowned and carry great blessings, they can also be produced in large quantities. Later, to form connections and distribute to others, they could be offered at cost or with a slight markup. Then this money can simply circulate directly, with some funds earmarked for specific Dharma purposes. In this way, there should be no fault. Therefore, regarding this issue, I have pondered it for a long time. I have also searched through various scriptures and treatises. Regarding specific scriptural references, I will share them later when it is convenient. Today, due to time constraints, I will stop here. In any case, this is an issue everyone needs to consider, because speaking from the spirit of Mahayana Buddhism, of course, it is best not to commit any misdeeds yourself. But the most important thing is how the Buddha Dharma can continuously remain in this world, how it can be propagated, how it can be circulated, and how it can flourish and spread far and wide. This is something worthy of everyone's consideration. All right, that concludes today's teaching.
Sonam dai tamche zaba thomna ni be jana pamshe jar kirga nanchi rano chuba chubam sonen rowa jurusha
Bandran gara badna asadar Bandran gara badna sada Bandran gara badna sadar